Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It is Wednesday.
All day.
Yep, got that there. All right, we're continuing on. Paul gives up his rights. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, starting at verse 13. Don't you realize that those who work in the temple get their meals from the offerings brought to the temple? And those who serve at the altar get a share of the sacrificial offerings? In the same way, the Lord ordered that those who preach the good news should be supported by those who benefit from it. Yet I have never used any of these rights, and I am not writing this to suggest that I want to start now. In fact, I would rather die than lose my right to boast about preaching without charge. Yet preaching the good news is not something I can boast about. I am compelled by God to do it. How terrible for me if I didn't preach the good news. If I were doing this on my own initiative, I would deserve payment. But I have no choice, for God has given me this sacred trust. What then is my pay? It is the opportunity to preach the good news without charging anyone. That is why I never demand my rights when I preach the good news. Even though I am a free man with no master, I have become a slave to all people who bring many of all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who followed the Jewish law, I lived under that law. Even though I am not subject to that law, I did it so I could bring Christ to those who are under the law. When I am with Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too live apart from that law so I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God. I obey the law of Christ. When I am with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessings. Don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadowboxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. Now the commentary. As part of their pay, priests in the temple would receive a portion of the offerings as their food. See Numbers chapter 18, verses 8 through 24. These verses concerning Paul's rights and the church's responsibility have a two-part challenge for the church today. First, the church must support its workers in a fair and equitable way. That's the church's responsibility. It can research pay scales, examine the standard of living in its community, and do what is right and fair. Second, Christian workers must not let their attitude about pay and benefits hinder the gospel. It is too easy for the desire for more pay to enter into a person's mind and distract them from serving. Ministers need Paul's attitude, a willingness not to demand their rights if to do so would hinder the gospel. Preaching the good news was Paul's gift and calling, and he said he couldn't stop preaching even if he wanted to. Paul was driven by the desire to do what God wanted, using his gifts for God's glory. What special gifts has God given you? Are you motivated like Paul to honor God with your gifts? Paul asserts that he has freedom to do anything, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, 19 to 22, but he also emphasizes a life of strict discipline, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24 to 27. The Christian life involves both freedom and discipline. The goals of Paul's life were to glorify God and bring people to Christ. Thus, he stayed free of any philosophical position or material entanglements that might sidetrack him, while he strictly disciplined himself to carry out his goal. For Paul, both freedom and discipline were important tools to be used in God's service. Paul gives several important principles for ministry. 1. Find common ground with those you contact. 2. Avoid a know-it-all attitude. 3. Make others feel accepted. 4. Be sensitive to others' needs and concerns. 5. Look for opportunities to tell them about Christ. These principles are just as valid for us as they were for Paul. Winning a race requires purpose, and discipline. Paul uses this illustration to explain that the Christian life takes hard work, self-denial, and grueling preparation. As Christians, we are running toward our heavenly reward. The essential disciplines of prayer, Bible study, and worship equip us to run with vigor and stamina. Don't merely observe from the grandstand. Don't just turn out to jog a couple of laps each morning. Train diligently. Your spiritual progress depends on it. Whatever happened to self-discipline? Many books and speakers guide wandering souls to self-fulfillment, self-satisfaction, and self-awareness. Not many tackle self-discipline. Self-discipline requires an honest look at your strengths and weaknesses with emphasis on the latter. It means building the will to say no when a powerful appetite inside you screams yes. For example, when you have self-discipline, you can 1. Say no to friends or situations that will lead you away from Christ. 2. Say no to casual sex, saving intimacy for marriage. And 3. Say no to laziness in favor of a can-do and will-do. Self-discipline is a long, steady course in learning attitudes that do not come naturally and changing natural appetites towards God's purpose. Where are your weak points? Pray with a friend for God's help to redirect weakness into strength. When Paul says he might be disqualified, he does not mean that he could lose his salvation, but rather that he could lose his privilege of telling others about Christ. It is easy to tell others how to live and then not take your own advice. We must be careful to practice what we preach.
That's our alarm clock that goes off in the middle of the night a lot.
Yeah. Sometimes he gets lost and doesn't know where we are, even though he just was here on my shoulder.
He gets confused. Yeah. He's very old.
Yeah, he's old. Got a little bit of dementia going.
Yeah. There's 2 things that I noticed in there that I just want to brief on. We just finished studying how we should guard ourselves from becoming stumbling blocks to others in their walk. And then today he was preaching about how when he was with the weak, he acted like the weak so he'd be a better witness. There's a fine line there, and we got to be very careful and use discernment on how we can live like the weak, but yet also not influence their stumbling block in our own lives and their lives.
Yeah, don't get sucked into their thing. Like,
right.
You don't go to the bar every day thinking you're going to, preach the gospel to everybody, and then next thing you know, you're just getting sucked down into that same, hole.
Exactly.
You have to choose your battles, but you do have to meet them where they are. If somebody, it needs you, then you should go wherever it is they are and preach the
But that doesn't mean that you go where they are and act like them there.
Right, exactly.
You can...
It's a fine line.
There's a fine line. I just wanted to mention that's not something just to breeze over. I mean, that is something to be guarded and careful about.
Yeah. Okay. Hope everybody has a glorious day. We got all of our, except Nala down there. We got everybody in the picture. Yeah. All right. I'll talk to you later.